Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Like Roddy Piper and Keith David's fight scene from They Live, which simply wouldn't end, this is The Discriminating Gamer. Say, speaking of fighting, that Napoleon liked to fight, let's take a look at War and Peace from Worthington Games. In War and Peace from Worthington Games, 2 to 5 players take on the roles of the various belligerents in the Napoleonic Wars. Of course, you have 2 factions, the faction led by Great Britain and the faction led by Napoleonic France. You also have playable countries like Austria, Prussia, and Russia. There's also Spain in there as well, which is allied to the French. Now, how the game works is essentially you can set it up in the basic scenario begins, I believe, I want to say around 1805 or thereabouts. And the game has, of course, various military units. You have infantry, artillery, cavalry. You have naval units as well. You also have chips to represent how many you have. Now, I will tell you flat out right now, this game is very similar to Axis and Allies. If you have ever played Axis and Allies, this game is almost a Napoleonic version of Axis and Allies with a few little bells and whistles to boot. Now, the game takes place over a series of rounds, and you have different phases throughout them. The first thing you have is a resource point phase. Essentially, you look at the board, see what areas you control, both on land and water. You add those together on the resource point track. Now, you may have saved, I think, up to 20 points in a previous turn. You can then spend them to buy new military units, which you'll set aside to the end of your turn. You can also spend them to do diplomatic roles to try to persuade neutrals to come to your side. Now, you can buy the units, you can also declare war with these points, but when you do a political role, essentially you have a track of states that it's like a tug-of-war. You have a 0, I think, up to 5 on either side for the Napoleonic faction or the British faction. When you get up, you want to try to get them up to about 3, where you can try to persuade them to join your ranks, your coalition. But essentially, you spend some of your resource points to roll die, and you can roll multiple die. You're trying to roll ones. For every one you roll, you kind of move them a box further into your side's faction, into your faction side. And then again, as I say, if they get far enough, you can try to persuade them to join your faction, come into the war on your side. After that, you have combat movement. Essentially, around the board, you move units into spaces with your enemies in which you attempt to do combat with them. You decide how many units you want to move. They each have kind of movement limitations. You move them into those spaces and get ready for combat. And then, of course, the next step is combat resolution. Now, you have a battle board which shows exactly how your units will roll in battle. For instance, infantry on its own is just going to roll a 1 on attack or defense. You have to roll a 1 to kill an enemy. However, if you have Napoleon with that army, up to 8 infantry on attack can hit at a 2 or a 1. If you have Wellington with the army, you can roll on a 2 or a 1 for up to 8 on defense. So you've got kind of a little different modifier there if you have those specific generals with you. Combat, of course, is simultaneous. You're going back and forth. You're rolling to see who who destroys who. But of course, dead units, casualty units still get a chance to roll. So as I say, it goes simultaneous. You keep going till one side or the other either retreats or one side is vanquished. In which case, the units that were attacking then occupy the area they were attacking into. Naval units are a little different. You're going to sink an enemy ship on a roll of 1. You're going to just send it back to port on a roll of 2. After combat phase, you can move any units that didn't move in the combat phase. You can do a non-combat movement, so you can kind of strategically start moving units around the board as well. During the non-combat unit phase, you also have a supply and attrition. You have to make sure that all of your units can trace a line of supply back to your home territory. If they cannot, then you kind of have to roll for each unit to see whether or not it survives. Finally, at the end of your turn, you will place the units you purchased at the beginning of your turn in any of your home territories, and then they are then available for use in subsequent turns. Now, as you are fighting, you're going to go ahead and perhaps conquer some of the neutral enemy capitals. If you do that, then you have to do a surrender check to see whether or not they surrender, in which case certain events trigger. And then again, you're always trying to get them to join your particular coalition. Again, if you invade a neutral country, then instantly they go into the other side's alliance, and one of the opposing player will kind of take control of that country and attempt to stop you. Now, the British win if they control, at any time during the game, Paris. As soon as they control Paris, they win. The French win the game if they can control London at any time during the game, or if at any time during the game, Spain, Prussia, Russia, and Austria are all either neutral or allied to Napoleon. And that's how you play War and Peace. So, War and Peace, as I say, it plays almost exactly like Axis and Allies. The only major difference here is the political control over these neutral states, which can go back and forth. And that's kind of a different level of war. You don't really have kind of a political or diplomatic system in Axis and Allies. It's just a straight war game. This is a straight war game, but it does have that other little level there as well. I'm a big fan of Axis and Allies. I always liked it, and I've been looking at this game for a long time. For a long time I was looking on Amazon, and it was like $70, $80, and there's just no way I was going to pay for this. And I bought this a few years ago, and I don't even remember how much I paid for it, but it wasn't nearly that much. I think I found it on sale somewhere or something, and it was 30-something. I can't remember. I thought I'll probably never see it again that good. I bought it, and it's sat on my shelf for at least a year, probably longer now. This is a game that I've wanted to play for a long, long time, and now, of course, where I'm getting ready to move, I'm kind of pulling some of these games from the shelf, getting them to the table to see whether or not I want to take them with me. Generally, I really like this game. It's, like I say, it's fairly quick, it's fairly involved, that is to say, it's fairly engaging, it kind of sucks you in. I do fear, now, and I'll tell you this too, I've only played one game of it, so take this for what you will. I've just played the one game. I do fear that maybe some strategies can become very samey, very similar. I suppose when we were playing, we were not really as aggressive with the political aspects of the game as I think perhaps we could be. We were mostly focusing on building weapons, and I wonder if the game kind of most of the time devolves into that. And if you played the game, leave a comment and let me know. But I liked the political aspect, and it did have some effects in the game that I enjoyed. If anything, I kind of wish Axis and Allies had some things kind of like that. That's one of the things. One of the Axis and Allies games actually wrote up all these kind of event rules to give me kind of some of that flavor that I wanted. And this game has some of that. I wish it kind of had some more. But it's interesting. It feels very thematic, and it's fun. It's a fun, fairly light, though involved, time-wise certainly, it's 2 to 3 hours, Napoleonic game, and I enjoyed it. I don't know if there's enough meat there for a lot of really serious, heavy war gamers, but for people like me that enjoy kind of light, quick, fun, well, not quick, but lighter and fun games with these themes and these mechanics, I think you'll really get a kick out of it. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to say, if you're a war gamer, you like light war games, go ahead and buy this one. You'll enjoy it. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. We are The Discriminating Gamer, and ladies and gentlemen, if I was the British player and I saw that France was coming to try to take London, I'd tell them, you've got some gall. Charles de Gaulle. It's anachronistic, I know.
Please somebody help me on my feet again, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band.
I don't get it. I don't win. So I go back to my ship. Hey! Alright. Okay.